Hey, Tom.
Hey, Virginia. Here we are again.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
Well, hey, how about the housing market? What the heck's going on there?
A billion people want to know, don't they? Or,
Yeah.
well, more like 35 million people want to know, all of Canada. I'll call it. I'll just call it. We're on the verge of housing being a national emergency.
Right?
The verge of, in my opinion, just my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no expert on housing, but I can see the writing on the wall, can't you?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, heard a story the other day. A couple of guys, if you haven't watched them, I think it's called the Real Estate Show in Canada. Got a couple of guys out of Toronto, and they're kind of staying on the pulse of what's going on. And he recounted a story. Now, one of these guys is a real estate broker, and the other guy's a developer. And the real estate broker recounted a story about a house that was sold in Pickering, and we're right back in it again. He says, 30 bids, 300,000 over asking, went for 1.3 million in Pickering. And these guys are making sarcastic remarks about, the situation, because mathematically, this is not the same situation as it was 3 years ago, even though it seems like it to the average person out there. But it's not. Interest rates are different. Everything's a different environment.
Everything's different. Yep.
Yep. But fear of missing out, FOMO, is obviously not gone away.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. And another fellow that we listen to regularly, I won't say his name, but he posed the question, can you buy the house next door? So obviously the house next door is probably going to be very similar to yours in a subdivision, right? Can you move next door right now? And he says, I'm here to tell you that the majority of people can't move next door, and the reason is they can't qualify.
That's right. Yeah.
So anyway, that isn't subject for housing being a national emergency. It's just some interesting things that are going on. But I think the Toronto Council just approved multiplex real estate now. So I don't know what the details are, but this is just another bandy. So I'm assuming they're going to allow people to break up homes into apartments and loosen up the regulations on all the code to do with that. Because, like, I heard students are literally living in rooms where they're hanging blankets to create separation in rooms. They're students, they're young, they'll get through it, and it's tough, and they have their dreams in front of them, so they're starry-eyed, getting up every day and hitting the books and stuff. But it's very indicative of something not good.
And like you said, there's so many basement apartments that are illegal that are going on, and that's just gonna quadruple.
Of course. What would you do? What would you do given the same being put in the same squeeze? One or the other of you have had your hours cut at work, or your job's lost, or your mortgage has gone up by 50%, and you're facing losing your home. What would you do? Some people rent out every room in their house if they have to, right? People do whatever they have to do to survive, but it's sad that economics has gotten to the point where people are resorting to this in one of the most so-called prosperous countries in the world.
Well, in every headline I read, it says, hey, the boom is back and everything's back to normal, and grab a house now while you can. The whole FOMO thing, fear of missing out. And they're making it sound like everything's okay. Everything's good. Your house is still worth millions.
Yeah. Well,
this is temporary, in my opinion.
It
Very
is.
temporary.
I agree. I think that it's, I think if you look at the standard chart for the curve of an asset as it goes through an investment cycle, we're right now we come off the peak, and we're right now in what's called the bull trap. So, you come off the peak and it drops 10, 15, 20%. Everybody thinks, okay, good, market's settled down now, time to start buying in again. And people will just start to buy in again. And as long as the news cycle is supporting that, they'll believe they're in a good position. But I think we're really in a bull trap. And you know what happens right after a bull trap? You've seen the chart, right?
Yep.
Straight down.
Straight down.
Usually. Yeah. And
So,
that's when the big capitulation will happen. But who knows, when that day is going to be. There's so many things, it seems. I keep saying, people here saying it feels like we're in the eye of a hurricane, and it's just
yeah.
everything's kind of static right now, but it feels like we're going to come out the other side of it into some pretty big headwind.
So I guess some of the immigration is driving that too.
Well, yeah, naturally. I listened to a couple fellows talking about that last night, and but it's kind of a back and forth thing. A lot of people are leaving. I mean, people come to Canada
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure they're sold in the brochure. They're sold all this. Oh, it's wonderful and all that, and all of that would be true, except what you're not told is the cost. And immigrants, when interviewed, that have been here a couple of years, all say, I had no idea of the cost of living here. It's crazy, right? And you got to feel for that, because nobody's going to tell them that, right?
I know.
So
Yeah.
it's just like a sack over the head and the dark punch in the face when you find out what it costs to live in Canada. And I personally know 3 people that moved back to India, and talked to other people that, like one of the guys we deal with here, his accountant moved back, and another guy I bought a tool from. I said, why are you selling all your tools? He said, I'm moving back to India. I said, why? He goes, too expensive to live here. Better back home.
Yeah.
Right. So, some of them are coming with the stars in their eyes that just read the brochure, and the ones that have lived under it a couple of years, some of them are going back. I'd love to know what the stats are on that.
Yeah.
The amount of people it would be very indicative of the dissatisfaction level with the Canadian economy, to see how many people are saying, I'm out, I can't do this here. We know a few at least, so I'm sure there's a lot more. Love to see the stats anyway.
Yeah. So now the US, we usually follow the US. It seems like whatever happens in the US, eventually we're like their little sister, brother, kind of
Yep.
follow suit. The US is in huge trouble right now in the housing. Do you want to talk about that? I mean, they're at the brink now. They're saying within months they're going to have a massive problem with housing.
Oh, well, they're a little less socialist than we are. Like in Canada, we're going to come to everybody's rescue and handouts and prop ups and all that. We're used to that here. US is a little bit more brutal, a little colder there in terms of their way of dealing with economics and stuff, and debt. And for real, there's going to be a foreclosure crisis coming up. I mean, it's on, like, literally that far away. If you look at the leading indicators, which I'm no expert on, I'm not going to get into it, but I understand them when I'm looking at another expert talking about them. I can totally relate to them. I'm just not very good at relaying them afterwards. But when you look at them and understand them in real time, it's like that close to something very, very ugly, very ugly. And here's the funny thing is, the US cleared out a lot of their debt in 08. We didn't.
Yeah.
So where are we at? Where is Canada at? It's almost unimaginable to talk about, because I think Canada is 3 times worse.
Yeah, I know.
That is the US. I think Canada is 3 times worse. We're just too apologetic and don't want to talk about it. But I mean, I've seen the charts compared side by side, and there's no comparison. We are way up here and the US is here. And so you can talk all day a lot, but the thing is, there's more reporting on the US as well. That's the other thing. There's far more reporting. Should take this phone call during precious metals. Yeah. So I was saying that it just seems like there are more people that are people from the US are a little more aggressive, I find, just socially aggressive. And there's just a lot more people that, when they see something going on they don't like, they stand up and say, something's got to be said about this. And they'll start a YouTube channel, start an organization. Americans are a little bit more sort of, they get fixated much quicker. They're more revolutionary mindset than Canadians are. They see a problem, they go towards it and not away from it. Just in my observation of spending time there, that's the big difference that I see with the American response. And so there are a lot more people in the US talking too, like with YouTube channels and stuff discussing these issues. So but that's changing. I'm following a lot of Canadians now that have stepped up and are reporting on the news in Canada, which is really refreshing to see. I mean, if you haven't seen Luke Smith on Market Mania, he's pretty good. The real estate guys, those guys are pretty good. There's a couple other honorable mentions that I can't remember the names of, but they're starting to speak now. So it's changing. Canada's speaking more about these issues, and
Mhm.
it's time. We need to talk about it. Like, if nothing else, we need to talk about, at least they're starting to loosen up regulation, but it's not really a fix. It's the money that's the problem, right?
Yeah. So what do you mean they're loosening up the regulations?
Well, with the multiplex issue, allowing, a
Right.
loosening of rules for multiplex, that's a step in the right direction, but is that really going to deal with the problem that people are living in rooms where there's blankets hanging between each other to create separation? Methinks
Yeah. And
not.
yeah. And to keep confidentiality, of course. But I've had people come in here and say, I need to sell my gold and silver because I need the money because I'm lending it to my children to buy a home for like $1 million. Okay, this is a lot of what's going on in Canada. Some of these parents are lending their kids money. They're taking out a HELOC. Like, you want to talk about that?
Out of the frying pan into the fire. Well, I read a stat, I think it was in Hilliard Macbeth's book, and he said that 34% of the mortgages in the last 2 years were mortgages that were extracted from the parents borrowing the down payment out of their
Yeah.
HELOC.
Yeah.
So yeah, so crazy. We got some mail here. I got to go then with. So yeah, 34%, I think, was the stat, had borrowed, parents had borrowed the money from a HELOC and lent it to their kids to get the down payment for the house. Because I mean, check the GTA, the average, house was 850,000 for a starter home. And so you're looking at like $160,000 down payment. Where's that coming from, right? Who can save that kind of money? It's impossible. And now another stat that just came down the news cycle was the third of mortgages apparently now are 35 to 40 years, 35 years
Yeah.
plus.
Yeah.
And they're not paying down their principal. They're in what's called negative amortization, meaning they're not making any payment on the principal. This is all so that they can just keep their payments down to where they're affordable. So they're just renting. They're renting their house now.
It's a soft default, right? A soft
Yeah, it's
default.
a soft default. Yeah, that's what I would call it, a soft default. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean,
the
you
banks
either
are
can
doing
afford.
allowing this.
Exactly. Yeah, you can either afford the payment or you can't. So these are, these are just a few of the things and that's just the first round of rate hikes, which haven't kicked in
No.
completely yet.
Mhm.
The results of that take 18 to 24 months to kick in. So
yeah.
Now we're going to have a pause for a while, and then what? We'll see, I guess. Phone again. So basically, what we said before was we're dealing with a soft default. So the question is, what comes after a soft default?
Right?
A hard default? I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah. And I want to say too that I think that when you think about it, that 30% that have those extended mortgages, in my opinion, that means that's the only ones that qualify from the bank. What about the other 60 something, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
or 70. What happens to them? They're not qualifying for the extended soft default. They're not qualifying. You can't qualify everyone for that.
No.
You know what I mean?
No, only some people are going to. I mean, despite their best efforts to, to accommodate people, some people just are not going to pass. And this is just the beginning. I mean, and we can't afford to have the kind of housing crisis that Los Angeles has in Toronto or Vancouver, even though it's starting to get that way a little bit. Like, if you talk to people in Vancouver, there are certain areas where, tent cities. And I mean, I was 2 years ago, I drove up Bathurst Street, and there was a park, I would say just a few blocks south of Harvard Street. And I counted, and this was in the winter, I counted 15, 20 tents in the park.
Yes.
In a little,
Yes.
and not a very big park either, maybe 4 or 5 acres. And there was 20 tents in there.
I know.
So that was 2 years ago. Where are we at
Right?
now? What's that going to look like It's bad. Something's got to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's got to solve this, and I mean, it starts with the money, always.
Yeah, and back to the point that you had said, this is going to end up a national emergency. So then what?
Well,
what are we going to do with
I
all
mean,
these people that are losing their homes? It's going to happen.
Well, the cure for all of it is just to get out of the way and let it happen, but that's never going to happen. So I guess we're going to have to accept whatever intervention in this. I mean, part of the problem now is that we have never addressed the real issue, which is the money. And then so you put a Band-Aid on, then you got to put another Band-Aid and another Band-Aid, and before you know it, you've forgotten where you started. And you just, well, let's just go from where we are and we'll put some more Band-Aids on, and sooner, well, the bleeding hasn't stopped. It's just under 22 Band-Aids, right? So this is what we do. Instead of dealing with the real problem in the beginning, we create two more and then two more on each of those, and until we've got a big spaghetti ball mess on our hand.
Sure. And the main point we're trying to get put out there for you guys is that it's not a big recovery. Don't think it is. Get ready, because this is not going to go well.
No, this is
not a big, we're back in the game with the housing.
I'm sure it seems, I'm sure it seems that way on the surface, but if you look behind the scenes under the hood, it's not the same engine running this economy now as it was 3 or 4 years ago. It's entirely different. So I'm curious if it'll last the year. If it lasts past the fall, past November, I'd be surprised, but that's not a prediction or financial advice, folks. Just my opinion that it's going to happen very quickly. There are just so many different things out there descending upon our economic world that people are not seeing, that it's unimaginable what it's going to look like if it happens all at once. It's
very unimaginable.
Yeah,
and then we haven't even factored into that the unemployment. So even if you do qualify for that extended soft default, what happens if one of you loses a job now? Are you still going to qualify?
Yep.
And there's going to be lots of job loss. Look at AI, all that.
Yep, AI is taking jobs. Like, if you're a writer, I was in a group chat the other day, and a guy showed a website that he built. He gave a half a dozen instructions to Chat GPT, and it built him a perfect website in 3 minutes. Say goodbye to your web design job.
Yeah.
I mean, not entirely and not immediately, but that's a big threat that a tool can do that. And
very big threat.
They just laid off a whole bunch of people out of the tech sector, and the majority of them were laid off because they never had a real job. Now, let me repeat that. They never had a real job in the tech sector. They were hired because the tech sector was so aggressively hiring at the time that they were hiring people just so someone else couldn't have their talent. So they just give them some job, chasing their tail around between offices and credenzas. And so those people, when it's convenient or it's inconvenient to keep paying them, are going to get let go. And the first round of layoffs in the tech sector was that. And now there's going to be even more, I would think, with AI moving in, right? Because that's going to hit the tech sector first and hardest, right? Because it is tech in itself.
And what about these other countries it's going to hit, like India and stuff? We hire out a lot of people. Web designers hire out a lot of people to do their work. They're going to lose jobs too in those countries because they depend on the Western countries to give them work. A lot of these guys, right? These tech guys.
I'm beginning to wonder right now. I mean, we had a phone call, a support phone call there the other day. I'm beginning to wonder if we're talking to human beings anymore.
Yeah.
How would you know? Right? This AI technology and deep fake voice technology combined, you can barely tell if something is real or not anymore. I don't know if we're really dealing with human beings. And I've played around with chatbots a little bit in marketing and stuff like that, and when they're in their rudimentary days a few years ago. And I mean, they've come a long way. I've seen a few things people have been doing with AI, and you got to shake your head that it's capable of producing that much information that quickly. It's amazing and accurate, extremely accurate.
Right. Yeah.
So so there goes a bunch more jobs, and so we're way from out of the woods yet. This is just, as far as I'm concerned, we haven't even had a financial crisis yet in reality. Because if you ask the average person on the street if there's a financial crisis going on, they say no, and that makes up 95% of the population and the mindset of the public. So until they know, it's not going to be real, is it? Until the majority is moving with that and saying, oh, hey, we better cut back on spending. Hey, we better not take that trip this year. Once the majority of the public starts to develop that attitude and sentiment, that's when to me, the real damage will start to show up. Because when people stop spending, the masses stop spending, you know, that's more defaults, more business closures, you know, more people not buying, more people losing their jobs. It's just it's a stair step down. You know, this happens, then you go here, then and it always ends up the same way, always.
Yep. More people moving into their parents' basements, more people renting rooms, more people having to sell those houses.
Yep. Yeah,
eventually, there's going to be a load of them on the market.
Yeah, I mean, you can move in with somebody else faster than you can build a house, right? So people will do whatever has to happen in an emergency. Move in with people, rent rooms out, you know, build illegal apartments, whatever they got to do. Sell space in the backyard for people to live in tents, rent out the garden shed. And you may laugh, but don't laugh. It's being done in places. People are renting out tents, space in their backyards in California and garden sheds and you name it. So don't say that it can't happen. It can. It's happening. So yeah, anything's possible.
Yeah.
The question is it probable? Well, I think on that note, it's probable that we should stop talking. Next time.